Did you know that in the 14th century, a person living in London had a life expectancy of about 35 years? A bad harvest could mean starvation. A small cut could mean a fatal infection. The Black Death, which peaked in the 1340s, killed an estimated 50 million people in Europe. That was perhaps half the entire population. Their world was filled with a level of daily hardship that is almost impossible for us to imagine. Yet they endured. They built cathedrals that still stand. They created art of incredible beauty. They wrote poetry and philosophy that we still read. How did they do it? How did they face a world of constant, grinding difficulty without the comforts of modern medicine, technology, or even a basic understanding of germs? What did they know about resilience that we might have forgotten? We live in an age of unprecedented comfort and safety, yet we suffer from epidemic levels of anxiety and depression. We have so much, but we often feel like we have nothing. Perhaps the wisdom of a harder time has something to teach us. Not as a nostalgic fantasy, but as a practical set of tools forged in the fires of real adversity. These aren't just quaint old sayings. They are survival strategies. They are the mental armor of people who had no other choice but to be strong. Number 25, what if you can't control anything? There is a powerful image from the Middle Ages. It's called the Rota Fortunae, or the Wheel of Fortune. You see it in manuscripts and on the walls of cathedrals. It's a giant wheel, and a blindfolded woman, the goddess Fortuna, is turning it. Clinging to the wheel are figures of men. One is at the top, wearing a crown with the inscription Regno, I reign. Another is falling off the side, his crown tumbling, with the words Regnavi, I have reigned. A crushed figure lies at the bottom, some sign Regno, I am without a kingdom. And one is, climbing up the other side, hopeful Regnabo, I shall reign. The message was brutally simple. Your position in life is not fixed. Your health, your wealth, your power, your fame, all of it is temporary. The wheel will turn, and it will turn without any regard for your plans or your desires. One day you are a king, the next you are a beggar. This wasn't a pessimistic idea. It was a realistic one. In a world of plagues, famines, and sudden wars, people knew that everything could be lost in an instant. This idea was most powerfully expressed by a man named Boethius. He was a Roman senator and philosopher in the early 6th century, right at the transition from the ancient world to the medieval one. He was a man who had everything. He was rich, respected, and a high-ranking official for the Ostrogothic king Theodoric the Great. And then the wheel turned, he was accused of treason, stripped of his honors, and thrown into prison to await his execution. In that cell, facing death, he wrote one of the most influential books of the Middle Ages, The Consolation of Philosophy. In it, a beautiful woman, Lady Philosophy, visits him. He complains to her about his terrible luck. He lists all the good things he has lost, and she gently scolds him. She asks, what did you really lose? All those things, wealth, fame, power, were they ever truly yours? No. They were gifts from fortune. And fortune is fickle. She gives and she takes away. To base your happiness on things you cannot control is to build your house on sand. Lady Philosophy tells Boethius that the only thing that truly belongs to him, the only thing fortune cannot take, is his own mind. His virtue, his inner character, true happiness, she argues, is found within. It is an internal state independent of external circumstances. This is a radical idea. It's the ultimate piece of medieval wisdom about hardship. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond. This sounds a lot like modern psychology, doesn't it? In the 1950s, a psychologist named Julian Rotter developed a concept called locus of control. He found that people generally fall into two categories. Those with an external locus of control believe their lives are governed by outside forces, luck, fate, other people. When things go wrong, it's not their fault. When things go right, it was just a lucky break. They feel powerless, like they are clinging to Fortuna's wheel. Then there are those with an internal locus of control. They believe they're in charge of their own lives. They believe their actions and choices shape their outcomes. When they succeed, they take credit. When they fail, they take responsibility and try to learn from it. Decades of research have shown a clear link. People with a strong internal locus of control tend to be less stressed, less depressed, and more successful. They are more resilient in the face of hardship because They don't see themselves as victims of circumstance. They see themselves as agents of their own lives. Boethius was arguing for an extreme form of internal locus of control. He was saying that even when you are in a prison cell, about to be executed, you still control the most important thing, your own soul. The 20th century psychiatrist Viktor Frankl discovered the same truth in a far more horrific setting, a Nazi concentration camp. In his 1946 book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl wrote that even when the guards took everything from him, his family, his clothes, his name, they could not take his freedom to choose his own attitude. He could choose to find meaning in his suffering. He could choose to maintain his inner dignity. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, he wrote, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. The medieval mind understood this in a way we often struggle with. They knew the wheel would turn. They accepted that hardship was a part of life, not an interruption of it. Their wisdom wasn't about trying to stop the wheel. That's impossible. It was about learning to let go of the rim. It was about finding a still point in the center, a core of inner strength that remains unshaken no matter how fast the world spins. They accepted a lack of control over the world, which paradoxically gave them more control over the one thing that mattered themselves. We live in a culture obsessed with control. We have apps to manage our time, diets to manage our weight, and financial plans to manage our future. And when we get a bad diagnosis or lose a job or a relationship ends, we are shattered. We feel that life has been unfair. We feel that the system has failed. The medieval person would have just shrugged. Of course, the wheel turned. It always does. The only question is, what will you do now? Will you curse fortune, or will you turn inward and find the strength that she can never touch? What we still don't know is profound. If our sense of control is so central to our mental health, what happens in an age where algorithms and vast impersonal systems increasingly dictate our lives? Can a person maintain an internal locus of control when their job is managed by an AI and their newsfeed is curated by a secret algorithm? And here is a more shocking question. What if the belief in an internal locus of control is just a useful illusion? What if neuroscience eventually proves that our choices are just a product of our brain chemistry and environment, and free will isn't real? If that happened, could our entire model of resilience collapse? Is our ability to overcome hardship dependent on a lie we tell ourselves? Number 24, does your suffering have a point? A medieval peasant gets sick. The crops fail. His child dies of a fever. What does he do? He might ask, why me? Just as we do, but his culture provided him with a set of powerful answers. His suffering was not random, meaningless noise. It had a purpose. It could be a test from God, a trial to forge his faith into something stronger. It could be a punishment for his sins, a painful but necessary cleansing, or, most profoundly, it could be a way for him to participate in the suffering of Christ. By enduring his own pain with patience and faith, he was becoming closer to God. His hardship had meaning. This idea is everywhere in medieval thought. Look at the lives of the saints. They are filled with stories of gruesome martyrdoms and extreme asceticism. Saint Lawrence was roasted on a gridiron. Saint Sebastian was shot full of arrows. These weren't stories of victimhood, they were stories of triumph. The saints triumphed over pain by imbuing it with a higher purpose. Their suffering was their ultimate act of faith. Ordinary people participated in this idea through practices like pilgrimage. A pilgrimage to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela was not a vacation, it was a long, dangerous, and difficult journey. Pilgrims walked for hundreds of miles, slept on the ground, and faced bandits and disease. This voluntary hardship was a form of penance, a way to atone for sins and demonstrate devotion. The suffering was the point. It was a physical manifestation of a spiritual journey. It was a way of turning pain into something holy. To our modern minds, this can seem bizarre, even masochistic. Our primary goal is to eliminate suffering. We have painkillers for headaches, therapy for anxiety, and insurance for disasters. We see suffering as a problem to be solved, a malfunction in the system. The idea of embracing it, of looking for its purpose, feels alien. And yet, the core insight that finding meaning in hardship is a key to enduring it is being rediscovered by modern science. In the 1990s, two psychologists, Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, began studying people who had been through terrible experiences, combat veterans, cancer survivors, people who had lost loved ones. They noticed something strange. While many suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a significant number reported positive changes in their lives because of the trauma. They felt a greater appreciation for life, had stronger relationships, felt a new sense of personal strength, and often discovered a new spiritual depth. Tedeschi and Calhoun gave this phenomenon a name, post-traumatic growth (PTG). What they found was that the key factor in determining whether a person experienced PTSD or PTG was not the severity of the trauma, but what they did with it afterward. People who grew from their trauma were those who actively tried to make sense of what happened. They didn't just move on, they tried to find a new narrative, a new story for their lives that incorporated the terrible event. They asked questions like, why did this happen? And what can I learn from this? And how can I use this experience to help others? They were, in essence, doing what the medieval peasant did. They were looking for meaning. A 2004 study published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress looked at survivors of a major earthquake. It found that the people who reported the most post-traumatic growth were those who engaged in what the researchers called deliberate rumination. They didn't just push the bad memories away, they thought about them, struggled with them, and tried to understand their place in the larger story of their lives. In contrast, those who engaged in intrusive rumination, unwanted flashbacks, and nightmares had higher levels of PTSD. The difference was intention. It was the active search for meaning. This is a profound challenge to our modern instincts to avoid all pain. The medieval world was saturated with stories, rituals, and beliefs that helped people frame their suffering. The story of Job, the Passion of Christ, the lives of the martyrs, these were all tools for meaning-making. When a person's life was shattered by hardship, their culture handed them a blueprint to rebuild it into something new and, in some ways, stronger. We have largely dismantled that meaning-making machinery. In a secular, individualistic world, when tragedy strikes, you are often on your own to figure out what it all means. We are told to be strong or move on, but we are rarely given a framework to understand how. The medieval wisdom is that suffering is not just a void. It is a space that can be filled with purpose. It is a raw material that can be forged into resilience. This doesn't make the pain go away. A mother who lost her child in the 14th century felt the same gut-wrenching grief as a mother today. The difference is that the medieval mother believed her child was in heaven and that her own grief, if offered to God, could have a redemptive power. Her pain was connected to a larger cosmic story. The challenge for us is not to adopt medieval theology, but to recognize the deep human need for meaning that it so effectively addressed. When we face hardship, our first question is often, how can I make this stop? Perhaps a better question, a more medieval question, would be, what can this teach me? Or how can this make me better? It is the difference between simply enduring and actively growing, but this raises some truly disturbing questions. If finding meaning in suffering is the key to growth, does our modern effort to create a pain-free, comfortable world actually make us more fragile? Are we, by shielding ourselves from all hardship, robbing ourselves of the very experiences that build character and wisdom? And here is a darker thought. If people can grow from trauma, could that be used as an excuse to justify or ignore the suffering of others? Could a government or a corporation say, this terrible event will build character as a way to avoid taking responsibility? Finally, what is actually happening in the brain when we find meaning in a negative event? Is there a neurological circuit for redemption, and if we found it, could we trigger it artificially, giving people the benefits of post-traumatic growth without the trauma? What would that even mean for the human experience? Number 23, who will catch you when you fall? Imagine you are a stonemason in the year 1250. You don't think of yourself as an individual first. You are a member of the stonemasons guild. You are a resident of your town. You are a parishioner of your church. You are a part of your family. These are not just labels. They are your identity. They are your safety net. If you get sick, the guild will support your family. If you die, the guild will pay for your funeral and help find an apprenticeship for your son. If a rival town attacks, you will fight alongside your neighbors. Your life is woven into a dense fabric of mutual obligation. Individualism as we know it did not exist. The fundamental unit of medieval society was the group, not the person. From the monastery, where monks lived under the rule of Saint Benedict with the motto Anima una et cor unum in Deum, one soul and one heart in God, to the peasant village, where survival depended on communal farming and shared resources, life was a team sport. People were bound to each other by oaths, by blood, by faith, and by necessity. This created a world that was, in many ways, restrictive and hierarchical, but it also created a world of profound belonging. In a time of constant danger, you were never truly alone. This is perhaps the starkest contrast with our modern world. We celebrate the individual, we value freedom, self-reliance, and personal achievement. We move across the country for a new job, we choose our own friends, our own partners, our own identities. This has brought incredible liberty and opportunity, but it has also come at a staggering cost. That cost is loneliness. In May 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, issued a special advisory. He called loneliness and social isolation a public health epidemic. He cited research showing that a lack of social connection is as dangerous to your health as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. It is associated with a greater risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia, and premature death. He wrote, "Our epidemic of loneliness and isolation has been an underappreciated public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. Our relationships are a source of healing and well-being hiding in plain sight." A medieval person would be baffled by this. The idea of a crisis of loneliness would be as strange as a crisis of not enough air. Their entire world was built on social connection. Their wisdom was not something they wrote down in a book. It was something they lived every day. Hardship is easier to bear when the load is shared. When a family's barn burned down, the whole village would come to rebuild it. When a plague swept through, people cared for the sick, often at great risk to themselves. Their survival depended on it. Modern science is confirming this ancient, lived reality at a neurological level. John Cacioppo, a pioneering researcher in the field of social neuroscience, spent his career studying the effects of loneliness on the brain and body. His work showed that feeling lonely triggers the same kind of fight or flight stress response as a physical threat. It raises levels of the stress hormone cortisol, increases inflammation, and disrupts sleep. Your body goes on high alert because, from an evolutionary perspective, being isolated from the tribe was a death sentence. A lone human was easy prey. Cacioppo's research demonstrated that our need for connection is not just a preference, it is a fundamental biological need, like food and water. The medieval world, for all its flaws, was structured to meet this need. The modern world is increasingly structured to deny it. We live in single-family homes, drive alone in our cars, and interact with people through screens. We value a kind of hyper-independence that would have seemed insane to our ancestors. They knew that true strength was not standing alone, but standing together. They knew that resilience was a communal property, not an individual trait. Think of the medieval guilds. A guild was more than just a trade union. It was a social and religious brotherhood. Guilds set quality standards, regulated prices, and trained apprentices, but they also held feasts, marched in parades, and sponsored chapels in the local church. They took care of their members from cradle to grave. They were a microcosm of the medieval ideal, a community of mutual support, shared identity, and collective responsibility. We have nothing that truly compares to that. We have professional networks and social media friends, but these are often thin, transactional relationships. They lack the thick, binding obligations of a guild or a parish. When we face a serious hardship, a job loss, a divorce, a long illness, we often find that our modern networks are not strong enough to hold us. We fall through the cracks. The medieval person fell into the arms of their community. The wisdom here is simple and urgent. We need each other. Resilience is not something you build on your own. It is built in the spaces between people. It is nurtured in families, in neighborhoods, and in communities of shared purpose. Overcoming hardship requires a safety net, and that net is always woven from human relationships. We have spent centuries dismantling that net in the name of individual freedom. Now we are discovering that we are dangling over a void, and we have to start weaving again. This leads to some deeply unsettling questions about our society. If our biological wiring is for the tight-knit community of a medieval village, are our modern megacities and sprawling suburbs fundamentally anti-human environments? Is the very architecture of our lives, the single-family home, the car, the cubicle, a primary driver of our mental health crisis? And what about the future? As AI companions become more sophisticated and emotionally responsive, will they be a solution to the loneliness epidemic, or will they be a final fatal blow to genuine human connection, offering a perfect simulation that keeps us from the messy, difficult, and necessary work of real relationships. Is it possible that the future of human resilience lies not in more technology, but in deliberately rebuilding the kinds of communities we thought we had left behind? Number 22. What if the end is always near? Let's walk into a medieval church, and you are likely to see something startling. It might be a painting on the wall or a carving on a tomb. It shows skeletons dancing. They are dancing with popes, with kings, with merchants, and with peasants. This is the Danse Macabre, the dance of death. The message is unmistakable: death comes for everyone. It doesn't care if you are rich or poor, powerful or weak, your time is short and the end is certain. Another common theme is memento mori, which is Latin for remember you will die. You see it everywhere in medieval art and literature: skulls, hourglasses, decaying corpses. To us, this seems morbid, depressing. Why would anyone want to be constantly reminded of their own death? We do everything we can to avoid the thought. We use euphemisms like passed away. We hide our elderly in nursing homes and our dead in funeral parlors. We are a death-denying culture. The medieval mind saw it completely differently. The constant reminder of death was not meant to be depressing. It was meant to be clarifying. It was a tool for living a better life. If you know that your time on earth is short and uncertain, it forces you to focus on what truly matters. Your petty squabbles, the pursuit of fleeting fame, the accumulation of wealth that you can't take with you. All of this fades in importance when you are standing face to face with your own mortality. Memento mori was a spiritual practice. It was a way to put your life in perspective. The primary goal of a medieval Christian life was the salvation of your soul. Confronting death was a way to prepare for the final judgment. It prompted you to ask, am I living a good life? Am I right with God? Am I ready for what comes next? This focus on the afterlife gave them a powerful anchor in the face of earthly suffering. This life, with all its pain and hardship, was just a brief, temporary prelude to an eternal existence. This belief didn't necessarily make the pain of a toothache or the grief of losing a child any less intense, but it framed it within a much larger, more hopeful context. This ancient practice has a surprisingly modern echo in a field of social psychology called terror management theory (TMT), developed in the 1980s by Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pajensky. TMT is based on the ideas of the cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker, whose 1973 book, The Denial of Death, won the Pulitzer Prize. The theory's core idea is simple. Humans are unique because we are intelligent enough to know that we are going to die, and this knowledge creates a potential for paralyzing terror. According to TMT, much of human culture is a vast, elaborate defense mechanism against this fear of death. We create and believe in cultural worldviews, religions, national identities, value systems that give us a sense of meaning and significance. These worldviews promise us a form of literal or symbolic immortality. If you are a good Christian, you go to heaven. If you are a great scientist, your name lives on. If you die for your country, you are a hero. We also strive for self-esteem, which is the feeling that we are a valuable person within our chosen worldview. Self-esteem acts as a buffer against death anxiety. Hundreds of studies have supported the predictions of TMT. In a typical experiment, researchers will subtly remind one group of participants of their own mortality, for example, by having them write about what they think will happen when they die. They then compare their behavior to a control group. The results are consistent. When people are reminded of death, they become more defensive of their own worldview and more hostile to people with different beliefs. A Christian becomes more devout. A patriot becomes more nationalistic. They also work harder to boost their self-esteem. This research shows that the medieval monks were onto something. Confronting death is a powerful psychological trigger, but they were using it in a very specific way. Instead of just letting the terror of death make them cling more tightly to their worldly identities, they used it to transcend them. The goal of Memento Mori was not to boost the ego, but to dissolve it. It was to shift focus from the temporary self to the eternal soul. There's another modern connection, this time from Stoic philosophy, which heavily influenced early Christian thinkers like Boethius. The Stoics practiced something called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This involved regularly imagining the worst case scenarios: losing your job, your health, your loved ones. The goal was not to wallow in misery, but to inoculate yourself against future hardship and to increase your gratitude for what you have right now. By regularly contemplating the loss of everything you hold dear, you come to appreciate it more profoundly. And when misfortune does strike, you are not caught by surprise. You have, in a sense, rehearsed for it. Memento mori is the ultimate premeditatio malorum. It is the contemplation of the one loss that is absolutely guaranteed. The medieval wisdom here is that running from the thought of death doesn't make you safer. It just makes you more fragile. It makes you terrified of aging, obsessed with trivialities, and unprepared for the inevitable. By contrast, turning to face your own mortality can be a source of incredible strength and clarity. It is the ultimate tool for overcoming the hardship of a finite life. It forces you to live with intention, with urgency, and with a focus on what is truly lasting. It's the simple, brutal wisdom of the skull on the desk. You are going to die. So how are you going to live? This practice, however, opens up a Pandora's box of questions. If terror management theory is correct, and our cultural beliefs are primarily a defense against death anxiety, what happens in a globalized, secular world with no single, unifying story about what happens after we die? Is this why our politics have become so polarized and tribal, as people cling desperately to smaller identities for a sense of symbolic immortality? Furthermore, is our society's obsession with youth and its denial of aging a collective, pathological response to the fear of death? And the most shocking question of all, if we could overcome death through some future medical or technological breakthrough, would we lose what it means to be human? If there were no end, would there be any urgency, any meaning, any reason to be good or to create things of beauty? Is our mortality the very thing that makes our lives precious? Number 21. Why should you keep working when nothing works? Life for most people in the Middle Ages was work. Hard, physical, unrelenting work. A farmer followed the rhythms of the sun and the seasons. A blacksmith stood at a hot forge all day. A woman's work in the home cooking, cleaning, spinning, weaving, raising children was never ending. There were very few leisure activities as we would understand them, and yet, work was not seen as just a curse or a means to an end. It had a deep spiritual significance. The guiding principle for this was found in the monasteries. The Rule of St. Benedict, written around the year 530, was the foundational text for Western monasticism. It laid out a detailed plan for a monk's life, a balanced rhythm of daily activities. The motto that came to summarize this rule was ora et labora, pray and work. For a Benedictine monk, work was a form of prayer. Manual labor was not seen as demeaning. It was seen as a vital part of a spiritual life. It kept the body healthy, the mind focused, and the community self-sufficient. Idleness, according to the rule, was the enemy of the soul. This idea that work has an inherent dignity and spiritual value spread from the monasteries out into the wider culture. The craft guilds, for example, took immense pride in the quality of their work. A stonemason carving a gargoyle for a cathedral or a weaver making a fine tapestry was not just making a product. They were using their God-given talents to create something of beauty and utility. Their work was their contribution to the community and their offering to God. It gave them a sense of purpose and a place in the world. This stands in stark contrast to how many of us experience work today. For millions of people, work is a source of stress, boredom, and alienation. In his 2018 book, Bullshit Jobs, the anthropologist David Graeber argued that a huge percentage of modern jobs are essentially pointless. They consist of ticking boxes, attending meetings, and writing reports that no one reads. This kind of work is soul-crushing precisely because it lacks a clear purpose. It doesn't produce anything tangible. It doesn't seem to make the world a better place. It is the opposite of the Benedictine ideal. The medieval wisdom of ora et labora suggests that a key to enduring hardship is to have a structure of meaningful activity. In a chaotic and unpredictable world, the daily and weekly rhythm of work and prayer provided a powerful sense of stability. It grounded you. The simple, repetitive tasks of farming, or spinning, or chanting the Psalms at the same time every day provided a psychological anchor in a storm. Modern psychology has a name for the state of mind that this kind of work can produce: flow. And the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi began studying this concept in the 1970s. A flow is a state of complete absorption in an activity. It's when you are so focused on what you are doing that you lose track of time, your sense of self disappears, and you feel a deep sense of enjoyment and control. Csikszentmihalyi found that people are most likely to experience flow when they are engaged in an activity that has a clear goal, provides immediate feedback, and strikes a balance between the level of challenge and their own skill level. Think of a medieval blacksmith. He has a clear goal to make a horseshoe. He gets immediate feedback the way the metal responds to his hammer. The task requires all of his skill and concentration. He is in a state of flow. This state, Csikszentmihalyi's research showed, is one of the most powerful sources of human happiness and satisfaction. It's not passive relaxation that makes us happy. It's active, skillful engagement with the world. Unemployment, by contrast, is psychologically devastating, and not just because of the financial strain. But numerous studies have shown a strong link between job loss and increased rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. A 2014 meta-analysis published in the Lancet Psychiatry, which looked at data from hundreds of thousands of people, confirmed this powerful link. Why? Because unemployment doesn't just take away a paycheck. It takes away routine, social contact, and a sense of purpose. It creates a vacuum of idleness, the very thing Saint Benedict warned against. The medieval world faced constant hardship, famine, plague, war. People didn't have the luxury of wondering about their purpose. Their purpose was clear: to work, to survive, to support their families and communities, and to serve God. This relentless need to work, which we might see as a burden, may have also been a source of profound psychological resilience. It kept them grounded in the present moment. It gave them a sense of agency and contribution, even on a small scale. It provided the rhythm and structure that our minds crave. The wisdom of ora et labora is not about romanticizing backbreaking labor. It is about recognizing that humans have a deep need for meaningful, structured activity. We need to feel that we are doing something useful. We need to lose ourselves in challenging tasks. In an age where automation threatens to make more and more human work obsolete, this medieval wisdom poses a critical challenge. If we are not careful, the leisure society we dream of could become a psychological wasteland. The hardship of having to work may be replaced by the even greater hardship of having nothing to do. This brings us to some truly fundamental questions about our future. If meaningful work is essential for human well-being, what will happen when AI and robots can do most jobs better than we can? Will we be able to find new sources of purpose and flow, or will we face a global crisis of meaninglessness? Could a universal basic income, intended to solve the economic problem, inadvertently create a spiritual one? And a more immediate question is the modern corporate world, with its bullshit jobs and emphasis on abstract paper pushing, fundamentally at odds with the kind of hands-on, skillful work that creates a flow state. Is it possible that the epidemic of workplace burnout and disengagement is a direct result of abandoning the ancient wisdom that work should be a tangible, purposeful, and almost sacred activity? What if the best therapy for a troubled mind isn't a pill, but a shovel, a hammer, or a sewing needle?